Hey everybody, welcome back. Now we're going to start a discussion around digital forensics and what it means, what it's about, and we're going to continue with that in the next several lectures. Okay, so first of all, what comes to your mind when you hear the expression digital forensics? Probably for a lot of you out there, this is to do with the TV show CSI, uh, and you're probably making an association with people in lab suits who are going to a crime scene, obtaining evidence, examining it, working on it, and so on and so forth. And you're probably not too far from what it's actually about, because it's pretty much that, but applied to information technology. And one of the things that you might be wondering, well, at least something that I was wondering when I first came across digital forensics a long time ago, was why isn't it as popular as other areas of security? Because first of all, security is more of an art than a science. And that's number one. Number two is the fact that security is this overarching term that encompasses a lot of things inside of it. And digital forensics is just one branch of this big overarching term. But there are other areas that are a lot more popular and even a lot more appealing to people. Let's say penetration testing, for example. It's very cool. It's very attractive, and it's also something that has very tangible results. It's something that the output from it, you could immediately start working on, because let's say if the penetration test succeeded, this means one thing. If it didn't, it means another thing. Now you have the penetration testing report that you as a company are going to make a lot of use from, and so on. Now with digital forensics, it's a lot different. And first of all, it's not an area that is under the spotlight most of the time, right? It has a lot more to do with science than other areas of security. That's one thing, and the other thing is that it has to do with something that has already happened, or with something that we want to understand whether it happened, and if it did, how it happened, right? And this is why it's very specific. It's a very it's an area of security that is very specialized, to put it this way. And this is probably why you won't find that many people who are intrigued by it, because you have to be you have to understand what its value is first, and then you have to really be knowledgeable enough to be able to practice it, because digital forensics requires a lot of knowledge in order to do it right, in order to do it in order to be skilled in it, to put it this way. Okay, so let's take a look at what the digital forensics process looks like. Now keep in mind that you might find these steps or these stages worded differently depending on the literature that you're reading, but in general the process is the same. So first you have the so-called seizure, and the seizure is pretty much what you're thinking of in regards to the let's call it the classic forensics process, right? You have something that has to be seized in order for the forensic specialist or the forensic scientist to start working on it. Let's say that it's a hard drive, right? The hard drive is first being seized, and in order for it to be examined, in order for the forensic process to actually start being applied to it. So then you have the so-called acquisition, and with acquisition, so let's take the example of the hard drive, right? Let's say that the hard drive was first seized by law enforcement, and then acquisition had to be applied to it. Now, in the example of the hard drive, you have this device that's called a write blocker, and a write blocker is basically a small piece of equipment that you hook up to a hard drive, and it makes sure that nothing gets written onto the hard drive as long as it's connected to it. So once you have that, the goal here is obviously to achieve integrity and to make sure that the data on the hard drive is not tampered with in any way while it's in your possession. Okay, so once you have the write blocker attached, then you can start the acquisition with which in this case would basically be by creating an image of the information that's written on the hard drive. Because as a forensic scientist, you won't be working on the original data, you'll be working on a copy of it. And this copy is going to be the so-called forensic copy that you're going to produce, and then you're going to do your work with it or on it, right? And here, we're also going to refer to something that we've talked about before when we were talking about the CIA triad, when we were talking about confidentiality, integrity, availability, and so on. So whenever we're talking about data and we're talking about the integrity of data, we're also talking about hashing, right? So hashing would be your friend here as well. Now, one of the ways in which you would verify the integrity of the image that you produced is by compiling the hash of the image and then recompiling it again in order to compare with the initial one. So this is all the acquisition stage. Now then you have the so-called analysis stage, and the analysis stage is pretty much self-explanatory, or it's pretty straightforward what it's about. This is basically where the magic happens. This is basically where you perform most of the work as part of this process. This is where you recover data. This is where you try to put all the pieces together in order to understand what happened, and so on and so forth. So the analysis stage. At the end, you have the so-called reporting, and the reporting is the phase or the stage where you basically complete the work that you've been doing so far by creating a report that would be suitable for showing or presenting to the diverse audience, right? Especially to people who do not necessarily have the technical knowledge to understand what you did. So this is all happening in the reporting stage. Something to keep in mind, because in one of the previous, or more than one, in several of the previous lectures, we've talked about encryption, right? And this is probably a good place to mention that encryption per se is like a double-edged sword, right? You could use encryption to conserve or to protect your data and your information, and to make sure that no one can read it, and to protect its confidentiality and so on. But at the same time, encryption is one of the most effective ways in which you could stop or block the digital forensics process, because obviously if the information that you're working on is encrypted, you won't be able to make too much use of it unless you could decrypt it in the first place. Okay. Right. Thank you, and I'll talk to you soon.